Hi, I'm Matthew Lapp, host of Matthew Lapp Train Guy. Also today I'm at the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, and continuing episode 291 with part 3.
What you see right behind me is the Boston and Providence Stagecoach.
The Boston and Providence Stagecoach was built by John Leitner, master car builder of the Boston and Providence Railroad shops in Roxbury, Massachusetts, sometime between 1834 and 1836, and is a stagecoach. This coach was initially pulled by horses, then later by steam locomotives. However, it was soon obsolete and was relegated to branch line work and then to track workers. At some time, it suffered a wreck and the pieces were gathered and kept in shops. In 1893, the car was reconstructed with a new frame on old wheels under the supervision of its original designer, John Leitner, for display that year at the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, Illinois. After the fair, it was loaned to Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana, to form part of a collection for the education of railway engineering students. In 1934, the New Haven Railroad, successor of the Boston and Providence, took it back to display with its new streamlined Comet train inaugurated in 1935. It later appeared at the New York World's Fair of 1939-1940. In 1951, the car was sold to the Danbury, Connecticut Fair, where it went on display as a historic transportation relic. It stayed there until 1982 when the fair closed and it was bought at auction by the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, and it can be seen on display in the building it is in today. And it was carefully restored as well. Also, this is the oldest surviving original passenger car in North America and can be seen here at the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, where it is today. What you see right behind me is General American Fodler 1057. General American Fodler 1057 was built by General American Transportation Company in 1930 and is a milk tank car. The car is equipped with a 3,000-gallon insulated stainless steel tank for transporting milk from rural areas to processing plants. The small sliding door above the side entry door was used for the milk loading hose to keep the interior as clean as possible. The entry doors were kept closed once the piping was hooked up, except when a worker was going in or out. The tanks were emptied from the bottom using pipes routed out the large door. The tanks were canted slightly toward the center to make it easier to drain them. The car had electric agitation motors that were plugged in, and their propellers stirred the milk in the tanks while it was being loaded or when waiting to be emptied. No ice was used as the insulation in the cars were sufficient to keep the milk from warming too much. In one test, milk was shipped from Wisconsin to Florida, and the temperature only raised 1 degree in a trip of 101 hours. Once the tanks were emptied, they were scrubbed clean by a worker who entered through the large oval door. They were then sterilized using steam and resealed, and regular inspections were made by local health authorities to ensure cleanliness. Also, it appears to be a former H.P. Hood and Sons tanker car. Then, later on, the car was retired, and in 1970, it was donated to the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri by the General American Transportation Company, where it is seen today. Also in 2009 or 2008, it was being repainted till it was all completed in 2010. Also today, this car can be found here at the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, where it is today. And also you can even visit the inside of it and see how it was used when people worked on board it as well. What you see right behind me is Frisco 1621. Frisco 1621 was built by Baldwin in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1918 and is the 484/20th steam locomotive built by that factory and is a 210O decapod type steam locomotive and is a Russian class steam locomotive. It was originally used for the Imperial Russian State Railways and is one of about 1,200 decapod locomotives built for the Imperial Russian State Railway by United States builders between 1917 and 1918, and over 200 were never delivered because of the Russian Revolution and were transferred to the United States Railroad Administration, and this one was numbered 1195. It also worked the Southern Railway system and was renumbered 8029. Then it was transferred to the Missouri, Kansas, Texas Railway but retained the number. Then in 1920, it was sold to the Fort Worth, Subiaco, and Rock Island Railway in Paris, Arkansas and was renumbered 101. The Frisco traded engine 641, which was a 460 10-wheeler type steam locomotive, to the Fort Worth, Subiaco, and Rock Island for this engine, and it replaced the original 1621 in 1925 due to the original being destroyed in a dynamite blast. Then the locomotive was sold to the Frisco Railroad, which is short for St. Louis San Francisco, and was renumbered 1621. Also, the Frisco acquired it along with 19 other orphan decapods. Over the years, they were fitted with stokers and a single thermic symphon built for Russia's 5-foot gauge. The locomotives were not regauged for the United States standard gauge, although the front pilot was replaced. The drivers were simply fitted with wider tires. Unfortunately, the wider tires meant the drivers could not climb over the rail on tight curves, but the St. Louis San Francisco Railroad considered them good locomotives for work on secondary lines, and they remained in service into the 1950s. They were designed for freight but also hauled passenger services on occasion. Then in 1951, the locomotive was sold to the Eagle Pitcher Company in Cardin, Oklahoma, and retained the number. Then the locomotive was retired, and in 1961 it was donated to the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri by the Eagle Pitcher Company, where it is on display today. In 2022, cosmetic restoration work began on the locomotive, and it went on till about 2023, and it started looking good as new. Even the tender had the logo for the Eagle Pitcher Company on it as well. Also, Frisco 1621 is one of 6 surviving Russian-class steam locomotives and only 5 remaining Frisco 210Os surviving today, and 5 remaining that once served the Eagle Pitcher Company. And also, 1621 can be found here at the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, where it is today.
What you see right behind me is Chicago Transit Authority 44.
Chicago Transit Authority 44 was built by the St. Louis Car Company in St. Louis, Missouri in 1959 and is a rapid transit car. This car was used on the elevated railroads in the city of Chicago many years ago on the Chicago Transit Authority Railway. It once hauled passengers around Chicago from station to station on the system. Then in 1999, the car was retired from service on the city's transit system and was then acquired by the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri. It was added with stairs because the stairs are for emergency exit use only in case something bad happens with the car and people need to evacuate the car. But you should never use those stairs unless it's really an emergency, though. In 2012, the car derailed in early July that year, and it was soon re-railed back onto the tracks because it was kind of a hot day and the sun may have caused the tracks to spread and caused the car to derail. And then the car was soon placed back on the tracks on all of its wheels. Today, it is preserved here at the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, where it is today, and sometimes it can be seen running on the trolley loop on the museum grounds as well.
What you see right behind me is Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority 2740.
Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority 2740 was built by the St. Louis Car Company in St. Louis, Missouri in 1947 and is a PCC type trolley car. The PCC stands for the Electric Railway Presidents Conference Committee, which conducted an extensive research program between 1930 and 1935 to develop a state-of-the-art streetcar. Originally, it was used by the Philadelphia Transportation Company, and it always had this number. It worked the trolley line for many years in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and hauled people from station to station. This car was built to run on a 5-foot, 2.5-inch gauge line, later regauged to 4-foot, 8.5 inches. Then in 1968, the Philadelphia Transportation Company merged to become the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, and again, the car kept the number. Then in 1994, it was retired and was then acquired by the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, where it is seen today. It was then restored to operation from 1995 to 1997 and started service on the trolley tracks at the museum. In 2025, some vandals broke into the museum and spray painted graffiti on the car, and soon museum volunteers started removing the graffiti from the car. Today, it is preserved here at the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, and can sometimes be seen running on the trolley loop on the museum grounds as well.
What you see right behind me is Illinois Terminal 1595.
Illinois Terminal 1595 was built by the Illinois Traction System Shops in Decatur, Illinois in 1928 and is an articulated frame steel steeple cab and is a Class C electric locomotive. This locomotive is an interurban freight locomotive built by the shops using trucks, traction motors, and control equipment from retired passenger cars. It was designed to haul freight, and the railroad it worked on was originally known as the Illinois Traction, and this is the original number. Then, when the Illinois Traction was renamed the Illinois Terminal Railroad in 1937, it kept the number. These locomotives were needed as freight trains became heavier. Then later on, the locomotive was retired, and in 1956, it was donated to the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri by the Illinois Terminal Railroad and can be seen on display at the museum where it is today.
What you see right behind me is Amtrak 4916.
Amtrak 4916 was built by the Pennsylvania Railroad Juniata Shops in Altoona, Pennsylvania in 1942 and is the 4388th electric locomotive built by that factory and is a GG1 type electric locomotive. Originally, the locomotive was built new for the Pennsylvania Railroad and was originally numbered 4918. It is one of 139 GG1s built. For several years, it was used to haul passenger trains along the system. Then, in 1968, the Pennsylvania Railroad and New York Central merged to form the Penn Central Railroad, and the unit kept the number. Then, in 1971, it was sold to Amtrak and was renumbered 916. Then, in 1976, it was renumbered 4916. Then later on, the locomotive was retired, and in 1982, Edmund Boyce Jr. purchased the locomotive for the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, where it is today. He purchased it in honor of his parents as well. Also, Amtrak 4916 is one of 16 surviving GG1s left in the world today, and this one can be found here at the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, where it is today.
What you see right behind me is Chicago and Northwestern 274.
Chicago and Northwestern 274 was built by Baldwin in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1873 and is the 3107th steam locomotive built by that factory and is a 440 American type steam locomotive. For several years, this locomotive hauled trains when it was in service. It was used to haul likely both passenger and freight train. Later, it was leased to the Winona and St. Peter Railroad in the state of Minnesota to the James River in the Dakota Territory, and it was where it was renumbered 40. In 1882, it was renumbered 1900. Then it was later renumbered 1040. In 1900, the Chicago Northwestern took over the Winona and St. Peter Railroad. It was then retired, and in 1908, it was donated to Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana, where it sat on display on the campus. Then, in 1951, it was donated to the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, where it is today. Also, Chicago Northwestern 274 is the only surviving 440 that served the Chicago Northwestern Railroad and is the only surviving steam engine that served the Winona and St. Peter Railroad as well, and it can be found here on display at the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, where it is today.
What you see right behind me is Missouri, Kansas, Texas 10.
Missouri, Kansas, Texas 10 was built by the Missouri, Kansas, Texas Railroad Shops in Denison, Texas in 1891 and is a passenger coach. This car was a caboose originally, and it was number 127 originally. Later, it was converted to being a coach from a caboose and to be a replica of the original Missouri, Kansas, Texas 10. Also, the original Missouri, Kansas, Texas Coach 10 was built like sometime in the late 1800s and was then scrapped in 1916. In 1910, this car was shopped and made into a prison car, and then later it was used as an outfit car assigned to wrecker service. Then in 1917, it was rebuilt and renumbered as 100,041 and assigned to branch line service. Then in 1945, this car was shopped and was made into a replica of Missouri, Kansas, Texas Coach Car 10. Also, this car and the exhibit train toured the Missouri, Kansas, Texas system to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the line's winning the West by beating all rail competition to the northern border of Indian Territory, now Oklahoma, Then in 1952, this car was then donated to the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri by the Missouri Kansas Texas Railroad, and also it can be found here at the museum, and it's part of the Katy Flyer train as well.
What you see right behind me is Illinois Central 764.
Illinois Central 764 was built by Rogers Locomotive Works in Paterson, New Jersey in 1904 and is the 6178th steam locomotive built by that factory and is a 280 consolidation type steam locomotive. This locomotive spent its life hauling mainline freight on the Illinois Central Railroad but was relegated to branch lines on the railroad as heavier motive power arrived. Then later on, it was retired, and in 1955, it was donated to the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri by the Illinois Central Railroad, where it is on display today. Also, Illinois Central 764 is one of two remaining Illinois Central 280s left in the world today, and 790 is the other one and is at the Steamtown National Historic Site in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And 764 can be found here on display at the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, where it is today.
What you see right behind me is Terminal Railroad
Association.
St. Louis 318.
Terminal Railroad Association of St. Louis 318 was built by the Terminal Railroad Association in Madison, Illinois in 1926 and is the 318th steam locomotive built by that factory and is an 080 eight-wheeler type steam locomotive. This locomotive was used originally for the Terminal Railroad Association in St. Louis, Missouri, and this is the original number, and it was used as a switch locomotive and might have hauled freight. And also, it was the first engine to be built with a one-piece frame and cylinder casting, one of the precursors to the locomotive design that made modern steam power possible. Then it was sold to the General Steel Casting Corp. In Granite City, Illinois, and also it spent most of its life switching at the company's plant as well. As well as that, it retained the number. General Steel worked with the Terminal Railroad Association to ensure its preservation as well. Then later on, the locomotive was retired from service, and in 1956, it was donated to the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, where it is seen on display today. Also, it is the only surviving Terminal Railroad Association steam locomotive left in the world today, as if it looks much more like a steam engine, and can be seen here on display at the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, where it is on display today.
What you see right behind me is Gulf Mobile in Ohio 5998.
Gulf Mobile in Ohio 5998 was built by American Car and Foundry in St. Charles, Missouri in 1935 and is a lightweight parlor observation lounge car. It was originally built for the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad and was used on the railroad's Royal Blue train from 1935 to 1937. For many years, it was used on the back of passenger trains. Also, this is the original number the car had. Then, in the 1940s, it was sold to Alton and became Gulf Mobile in Ohio and named Abraham Lincoln. Then later, it was retired and was then acquired by the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, and can be seen on display where it is today.
What you see right behind me is Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 482.
Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 482 was built by Pullman in 1948 and is a sleeper car. This car is an 8631 sleeper car, which means it has 8 duplex roomettes, 6 roomettes, 3 bedrooms, and 1 compartment. Also, the car is named Dubuque. This car is painted in the Northern Pacific two-tone scheme colors. It was actually owned by the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad, and the reason it is painted in the Northern Pacific two-tone scheme is because it was in pool service on the Northern Pacific's North Coast Limited passenger train to offset the Twin Cities to Chicago portion of the trip over Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy tracks. Then later on, the car was retired, and then in 1969, it was part of the Steamtown collection in Bellow Falls, Vermont, which the site is now in Scranton, Pennsylvania. The car was later acquired by the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, and it was carefully repainted to the Northern Pacific two-tone livery. And today, it is preserved here at the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, where it is today.
What you see right behind me is Missouri Pacific
6210. Missouri Pacific 6210 was built by American Car and Foundry in Kenton, Ohio, 1924, and is a commuter car. This car was used on the Missouri Pacific commuter trains many years ago, and it has wide open platforms. This car operated between Pacific, Missouri, and St. Louis, Missouri for the railroad, and also passengers would even ride aboard this car as it would take them between the locations this car operated between. Then later it was retired, and then it was acquired by the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, where it is today.
What you see right behind me is the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Aleutian.
The Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Aleutian was built by Pullman in 1923 and is a heavyweight office car. This car was originally used for the Copper River and Northwestern Railroad and was numbered 100. Then it was later sold to the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad and was renamed Aleutian. For many years, this car was used at the back of passenger trains and was used for railroad executives on board as well. Then later on, it was retired, and in 1970, it was donated to the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, where it can be seen on display today. Also, it was featured in the 1995 HBO movie Truman. Today, it can be seen here at the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, where it is on display today.
What you see right behind me is Illinois Central 30.
Illinois Central 30 was built by the Illinois Central Railroad Burnside Shops in Chicago, Illinois in 1943 and is a heavyweight dynamometer car. This car was built with the instruments provided by the University of Illinois, which it was owned by. The dynamometer car is a rolling laboratory that tests the pulling power of locomotives. The front coupler is attached to the frame by a hydraulic cylinder. The pull of a locomotive moves a piston in the cylinder, and measuring instruments in the car record the data. The systematic is so sensitive it can detect the force of a person pulling on the coupler, and so strong that it tested an engine pulling a 213 car coal train. This car contains as operating compartment with recording table, instruments, and tool bench, as 2 staterooms which accommodates 4 people each, and also has a toilet, shower, and kitchen. This car was last used behind a steam locomotive in 1952 and was only used once behind a diesel-electric in 1955. Then the car was retired in 1955 and was then donated to the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri in 1969 by the Illinois Central Railroad and the University of Illinois, and it can be found on display right here where it is today.
What you see right behind me is the Reading Black Diamond.
The Reading Black Diamond was built by Baldwin in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1889 and is the 10147th steam locomotive built by that factory and is a 222T tank engine single type steam locomotive. This locomotive was used for the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad when that was the name it was, and it is a steam-powered inspection locomotive. Then in 1923, the railroad was merged as the Reading Company and still had the name. The interior was designed for VIP passengers with walnut paneling and seating for 8. The bands on the boiler were Russian iron in the cab and brass in the passenger section. The limited area behind the firebox meant it had to be fired by a small boy. Then later on, the locomotive was retired, and in 1948, it was donated to the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri by the Reading Railroad. Also, between 2010 and spring of 2012, the locomotive was repainted and it sat under the other building under a shelter, and it was taken into the shed for repainting and refurbishment. Then once it was repainted and refurbished, it was then moved to this spot and can be seen on display right here where it is today. Also, it is like one of the very few surviving United States steam-powered railroad inspection engines, and this one can be found here at the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, where it is today.
What you see right behind me is General Motors 103.
General Motors 103 was built by Electromotive Division in LaGrange, Illinois in 1939 and is the 1030th diesel locomotive built by that factory and is an FTA type diesel locomotive. It is the first F unit built. Also, it was built to promote the locomotive as a freight hauling diesel electric. This and the B unit toured 35 states and 20 Class 1 railroads in 1939 and showed itself superior in operation and running cost to steam freight locomotives. It consequently convinced many railroads to convert to diesel power in the ensuing years, and it is the first in EMD's highly successful F-Series. Then it was sold to the Southern Railroad and it was renumbered 6100. Then in 1961 it was donated to the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri by the Southern Railroad. In 1982 it was declared a National Engineering Landmark. Then it was repainted to its look as how it originally looked as when it rolled out of the factory. Also, it even attended Sacramento Rail Fair 1991 in Sacramento, California at the California State Railroad Museum. In 2014, the locomotive was taken to the North Carolina Transportation Museum in Spencer, North Carolina, and was one of the streamlined diesel engines that were stars of the event. Then, after the event, it was towed back to St. Louis, Missouri with its mate that it was paired with many years ago, which was the B unit, which is owned by the Virginia Museum of Transportation in Roanoke, Virginia. Then in 2020, the B unit went back to the Virginia Museum of Transportation in Roanoke, Virginia. Today, it can be seen here on display at the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, where it is seen today.
What you see right behind me, St. Louis Southwestern 95589.
St. Louis Southwestern 95589 was built in 1913 and is a wedge snowplow. It was originally a Vanderbilt tender when it was built, and it was originally paired to a Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific steam engine numbered 2572, which is a 282 Mikado type steam locomotive and was a K60 class steam locomotive. And the locomotive serial number turns out to be 40142. And the locomotive was built in 1913 by the Baldwin Locomotive Works in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and the locomotive's body was scrapped later on. Then, in 1957, the tender became what was left of the locomotive. Then, in 1957, it was converted to being a wedge snowplow and was numbered 95589 and was used for clearing snow off the rails. Later, it was convoyed to the St. Louis Southwestern Railroad when the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad was broken up and the lines were sold. It was then used by the railroad's merger, Southern Pacific Railroad, in 1992. Also, the plow would be coupled to one or more locomotives, which would push it through the snow. Then in 1995, it was donated to the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri by the Southern Pacific Railroad and was relettered to how it looked when it worked the St. Louis Southwestern Railroad. Today, it can be seen here on display as well.
What you see right behind me is Union Pacific 900,081.
Union Pacific 900,081 was built by the Union Pacific Railroad Shops in Omaha, Nebraska in 1966 and is a rotary snowblower. This snowblower is 52 feet and 2 inches long, 52 feet and 2 inches long and 17 feet tall. Like most snow plows, it was not self-propelled, but was pushed forward by one or two locomotives from behind at 4 to 6 miles per hour. The engineer could control both the plow and pusher locomotives from the plow's cab. The 12-foot rotary blades were driven by an electric generator powered by a GM/EMD 16-cylinder, 3,000 horsepower turbocharged diesel engine. Inside, a steam generator heated the cab, preventing pipes freezing, and could thaw out the rotary blades if stuck. This unit was used to blow snow off Union Pacific lines many years ago to keep the line clear for trains to get through as well. Then later on it was retired and then it was acquired by the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri, where it can be seen on display today as well.
What you see right behind me is Texas and Pacific 1603.
Texas and Pacific 1603 was built by Pullman in 1920 and is a passenger coach. It was built as an all-steel combination baggage and passenger car. This coach was used for passenger trains for the Texas and Pacific Railroad, and it was used for passengers to ride aboard and have a good time riding a train as well. It also carried baggage in one section of the car. In 1951, the first conversion of the car was done by the Texas and Pacific Railroad in the shops in Marshall, Texas. Also, the car was converted from a passenger baggage car to an instruction car and was renumbered 23. Also, the majority of the windows were removed. The car was purchased by the Monsanto Company from the Missouri Pacific Railroad in May 1962, and the second conversion was done in June 1962 by the St. Louis Car Company of St. Louis, Missouri, making the Monsanto Universal Training Car. As well as that, it was renumbered 3210. The car operated from 1963 to 1966 and was retired and was stored in Soda Springs, Idaho till it was donated to the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri in 1971. Also, it has words saying train of thought, and also it is even used as an educational car as well. This car has been restored and remodeled to provide a facility for additional programs at the museum and is open for facilitated field trips and Saturday Boy Scout/Girl Scout programs as well. And more information about that, do check the museum's web.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed learning about trains with me today in Matthew Lapp Train Guide. Also, I hope to see you all again real soon. And if you didn't subscribe to the channel yet, the subscribe button is just down below the video screen. And if you didn't give the Facebook page a like yet, here's where you'll want to go. And if you didn't give the Instagram page a follow yet, here's where you'll want to go as well. Also, be sure to get your merch at teesprings.com. The link is in the description box below, along with the Facebook and Instagram pages. And as always, remember to subscribe to the Train Guy. So this is Matthew Lapp, host of Matthew Lapp Train Guy, signing out. Until next time, all aboard!